Okay, today's Q&A is about wine, and the question is, what Kashrus issue should I be aware of when I choose a wine? So there's a unique halacha that applies to wine and grape juice, and it's called stam yain. As I talk today, I'm going to talk about wine, but everything I'm going to say applies to grape juice just as well. Anyhow, the halacha of stam yain is that if wine is moved or touched by someone who's not Jewish, that wine becomes asur. For this reason, wine and wine vinegar without hashkacha is not kosher because it's assumed that it's stam yain. Okay, so it has to be made specially in a way that avoids it becoming stam yain. An important exception to this rule is that once the wine is mavushal, it cannot become asur. I'm going to explain mavushal in a second, but just before I go on, let me just say that if it was stam yain, making it mavushal afterwards doesn't take off the isser; it stays asur forever. But if it's mavushal before someone touched it, before the non-Jewish person touched it, then it would not be asur. So what the literal translation of the word mavushal means cooked, and poskim have different opinions of what it takes to qualify as mavushal. So one of those questions is, what temperature does it have to reach in order to be considered to be mavushal? And that question of what temperature it is has to do with the fact that the earlier poskim used two ways to describe what mavushal is. One, they said, is that it should be when it's yatzal, and also they said is when it's yismat mimidasai, which means is when as you heat something up and vapor start escaping, it loses some of the volume of the juice that you had. It's yismat mimidasai, some of the measure, some of the amount that you have just boils out and it's gone. So Ramosha understands that those two are the same. Yatzal and yismat mimidasai are the same. And therefore, when he says when the wine has got to 175 degrees, which is an upper limit of Yatzal display, then it's considered mavushal. Others, like Minchas Yitzchak and Shevet HaLevi, say that Yisma Mimidasai is higher than Yatzal display, and therefore it's not considered mavushal until it reaches a hotter temperature. So let's say somewhere between 190 and 212 degrees. So that's our first question: is how hot does wine have to become mavushal? Second issue is, can you do this bishul, this cooking, so to speak, using pasteurization? Most American hashkachas say that that's perfectly fine. As long as it hits the right temperature, then that's good enough to speak mavushal. But some Israeli poskim disagree for a couple of reasons. One is pasteurizers are closed systems, so no vapor escapes. If we're trying to gain the yismat midasai, that doesn't happen. Second is the pasteurizer is so efficient, or I don't know what the right word is, but that the taste is not affected, or basically the taste is not affected by going through a pasteurizer. Which would happen if you cook it in a regular pot. You lose some of the flavor, boils out also. Another thing is that pasteurization is so common that maybe it doesn't qualify as being an unusual type of wine, and it could be that being unusual is part of the reason why mavushal is mutter. So because of that, some Israeli poskim are of the opinion that bishul through pasteurization is not considered bishul, and therefore you'll actually sometimes see on wines coming from Israel, and it'll say on it mevushal aydei pistor, which means we made it mevushal through pasteurization, and sort of if you don't accept that, if your rabbi tells you that that's not considered mevushal, then treat this wine as if it's not mevushal. And one last issue is that Ramosha said that it's possible to make wine be mavushal even before you took the juice out of the grape. Okay, the juice is still, so to speak, in the grape, and you could already make it mavushal. Why is that? Who cares? The reason why that's good is because the din is wine can't become asur, can't become stam yain until the juice has separated from the rest of the fruit. That's called hamshacha. So until the hamshacha happens, it can't become asur. Well, if I can make it mavushal before the hamshacha, while the juice is still in the fruit, then I made it mavushal. It means this juice, it'll be impossible for it to become stam yain because I'll have made it mavushal before the time when it even could become stam yain. So it makes the hashkacha job a lot easier. You just have to make sure this step happens, but you don't have to. There's less concern that someone might touch something when they weren't supposed to. So wine that's mavushal has these big advantages that now anybody could touch it and it won't become asur. So like a waiter or someone cleaning in a home or in a facility can touch it and it wouldn't be a problem. But there's two reasons why companies would want to not make their wine mevushal. One is that some consider that it ruins the taste of the wine. And the second is that there are those who hold that it's a preference for that when you make kiddush, you should use wine that was not mevushal. So that would be, these are reasons why people would make their wine not be mevushal. Just bear in mind that sometimes when it's called non-mevushal wine, it's actually pasteurized to a temperature that's borderline yatzla display. So it's not hot enough to be for sure mevushal, but it's not so clear that wine is necessarily has the advantage of being good for kiddush. Anyhow, so that's that. Now, some things that we're not going to talk about. 4 things we're not going to talk about is how much water can you add to wine and still keep bar pegafen. Another question 2 is it better to use red or white wine for a mitzvah that needs wine? Number 3 is if grape juice from concentrate has the same status as wine as straight, made without concentration. And the last is about is it okay to have music playing at a meal that includes wine? Any of those questions we are not going to talk about beyond today's scope of discussion.